Welcome to another Stump the Chumps here at Creative Electron. Again, we have Dr. Bill Cardoso and Dr. Glenn Thomas with us to answer some questions that we've been crewing over the period of time that we've been doing these fireside chats. So let's go ahead and dive right in. You know, we like to spend a while on these questions, so I don't want to waste any time with witty banter.
Let's see if we can get more than one or two today, right, David?
Yeah.
You have to get faster at asking the questions. That's your fault. You know that, right?
Yeah, I just got to start interrupting you in the middle of it.
Yeah, you ask too slow. That's the problem.
All right, so the first one is, why do different systems employ different beam direction? For example, horizontal, top to bottom, bottom to top.
That's an interesting question, and actually a good question. Typically, in an X-ray system, right, we really start out with the sample and what we're trying to accomplish, right? So we have a few criteria. We need to be able to see the defect or see the artifact or see the landmark, what we're trying to accomplish. We need to look at magnification. How much magnification do we need in a system? The sample, what type of sample are we looking at? Again, that goes back to what are we trying to see in the image. And from that point, we can determine what configuration that we would need. Like we've covered in the past, essentially we're taking an X-ray source. In our case, it's electromechanical, it's an X-ray tube. We're applying some voltage to it, getting some photons out the window, shining those photons towards a detector. It could be a flat panel detector, it could be an image intensifier, it could be a line scan camera. Again, it all depends on the sample and what we're trying to accomplish with that sample. In this case, we would take a look at the X-ray source and decide, resolution-wise. So we would have a larger focal spot would require a longer source to image distance. The X-ray beam is a point source, essentially, and it comes out in a cone angle. That cone angle has some geometrical unsharpness, and we have some convergence of beam in that cone angle. So we need to determine what the source to image distance would be ideal for the application, right? So we may be able to use an 80 kV 33 micron source. We may be able to use a 1 micron source, right? It depends on the application again. The closer the focal spot is to the window, the higher the magnification, and the closer we can get that source to image distance. The penumbra effect and the geometrical unsharpness effect will affect the X-ray image. So if we get a very tall sample, we would want to have a very large source to image distance to increase that beam size, increase the sweet spot in the beam. There's quite a bit of physics involved. As far as top to bottom on an X-ray system, left to right, doesn't really matter. Again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. It makes no sense to have a long source to image distance and then put the sample right on the detector, or have a long source to image distance and then have the sample up in the air. There's a compromise on both sides. Photons don't care if it's top or bottom, left or right. You're shooting photons through the sample, casting an invisible image on the detector, and getting a resultant image. Regardless of the image detector, that's how it has to happen. That's why it's transmission X-ray. So it all basically comes down to the sample and what we're trying to accomplish with the sample. Electronic components, we want more magnification, kind of a natural magnification, geometrical magnification, and we get that by putting the X-ray source on the bottom, putting the sample closer to the X-ray source. If I wanted more magnification, I would flip that around. Or if I wanted more field of view, I would flip that around and put the sample closer to the detector. That will give me a larger field of view, but less magnification. So again, that would be a compromise that we would have to determine what's a good working area, what's a good size for the field of view. Because if you remember, we're taking an X-ray source and a detector with a distance of, say, 36 inches, 18 inches, whatever. If we put the detector So we have an 18 inches. We put the sample in the middle of that 18 inches. We will get 2 times magnification, geometrical magnification, right? So with that, if you follow the cone of the beam, we will get a reduced field of view. So we may have a 4-inch detector, but we will get roughly a 2-inch, 1 3/4 inch field of view out of that. And as we get closer to the tube, that field of view will become smaller and smaller. So it's a compromise between field of view, magnification, resolution, and detector size. Whether we would go on the top of the tube, top down, or bottom up. Horizontal X-ray systems are ideal for hard, heavy, cumbersome parts. Same concept as vertical. We just put the X-ray tube on, say, the left, the detector on the right, and we put a stage in the center that we can set the sample on. And typically you would fixture the sample to a degree, but you would use gravity to hold the sample onto the stage. You know, suspending a sample out in the vertical system that say weighs 2 or 3 pounds becomes real cumbersome. And that creates a lot of issues, a lot of problems in breaking X-ray tubes and detectors when you drop that sample in the system. And in some cases, like say an engine block, the ideal method would not be left, right, up or down. It would be a C-arm type configuration where you have the X-ray tube and the detector on a mobile arm, and that mobile arm would move around the sample and do the stage. So that's another version of the same thing. But as far as top down or bottom up, makes no difference as far as the photons are concerned. It's really the manufacturer understanding the physics of X-ray and applying those physics to get the best resultant image. Anything to add?
Yeah, it's interesting that as you were describing these different configurations, I was thinking historically, right? How many, even for electronics, how many variations were there in the 80s and maybe early 90s, and then by the late 90s, early 2000s, we've seen a convergence, right, of the configurations. For example, do you remember people who used to put the X-ray source for electronics, right, where you have electronics usually inspecting flat things, right, PCB,
right,
pre-circuit board. So it's a flat sample, X, Y, that you want to be able to move in X, Y. So it's very intuitive to put that on a stage, right? A low density stage, carbon fiber or acrylic or any type of stage that allows you to move the sample in X, Y. You have the sensor and the source in a vertical beam so that you can, easily move the sample. You would get exactly the same image if you flip it around 90 degrees, right? If you have a horizontal beam with the X-ray source on the left and the sensor on the right, for example. The only difficulty now, you have this flat object sitting, vertically, and you then you have to put a jig or something you can slide. It becomes more complicated, more cumbersome. It's much easier to, let gravity help and just sit on a flat stage. But for example, remember the early days would have people putting X-ray source on the top, remember, and then the sensor on the bottom, and which is not a very good idea, because if you have, for example, on your board, tall electrolytic caps or connectors, that tall object can go ahead and hit the source, causing considerable damage to the source or the sample or both. But it's interesting over the years how they've converged, right? And pretty much everyone's using the same source on the bottom, sensor on the top configuration for electronics. And then you have everything else, right? You have parts counting, which is a fairly new configuration. Some companies using source on the top, sensor on the bottom. So you have, like you said, very high field of view. We've taken a different approach. We put the source on the bottom and sensor on the top. So we could have a mobile unit, not a unit that you need a crane and you have to bolt to the floor because it's so top heavy. And it's interesting that people, I don't know, people might think that, X-ray photons are impacted by gravity, right? Because they think that putting the source on the bottom, on the top, changes the quality or the image itself. It doesn't. The only impact on the image, on an X-ray image, is the relative distance between the source, the sensor, and the sample in between. That's all. Those X-ray photons are going to be flying out at very close to the speed of light, right? And no, it doesn't matter if they are shooting up, shooting down, or shooting sideways. And at the end of the day, it's a function of the sample, right? And that's why once in a while, right, Glenn, we get people come to us saying they're going to buy machine X to inspect a sample, and we're like, "What are you trying to accomplish here? Who told you that's a good idea?" Right? It's like, it makes no sense,
Exactly.
right? Like, for example, like I said before, a horizontal beam to inspect a PCB, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's just the wrong approach. There are much better approaches elsewhere. And then, or a vertical beam to inspect a heavier sample, right? Engine casting, things that you really want to be able to move it around. And again, we only use gravity, right? Because gravity is one of the few things that we know works everywhere on Earth, right? For now, I don't know if that might change in the future, but for now, we're pretty sure gravity is, works pretty much anywhere within, a certain distance from Earth. So might as well use it, right, to your advantage.
Right. And then some of the older systems, the reason you saw such diversity back in the day, say in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of the systems were film-based systems being converted to real-time systems. And in a film system, it made sense. You had the source on the top, you had the detector, which was a sheet of film placed in the bottom of the cabinet, and you suspended the sample somewhere in between. The easy thing to do was to put a real-time or put an image detector in there, an image intensifier. So that just carried over, and it was, more of a copycat concept. Well, that's how we do it. And everyone copied it for a while until we started really getting into the imaging of electronics. Yeah. And we started to understand exactly what needed to happen. And then you start to see some changes in the concepts of how an X-ray should be produced for an electronic application.
Yeah, because most medical systems are contact magnification, right? For the most part, you're not magnifying. You're just taking as much field of view as you can, and those are the precursors to the, those use film, so everything migrates from that, right, trend, and then as time goes by and technology evolves and the industries grow, you can start specializing, right, and creating machines specific to that, to a specific vertical, specific industry.
Yeah, it's just medical X-ray. You don't want any magnification, as little magnification as possible, because you could inadvertently give someone an enlarged heart. They're going to rush right over to surgery, and it's like, well, what do you mean I gave them 3 times magnification on that image, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's one of the major problems when we started out in the electronics industry, X-raying electronics, was the transfer of the technology and the image-based stuff. Because if you remember, a lot of contract manufacturers in the early days would go to the hospital, stand in line and get an X-ray of their prototype boards. So a lot of that X-ray technology just carried over the concepts and the thought processes. And some of the young companies, because back in the day, some of us didn't have a clue what we were doing when we started in this X-ray business, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and even in hospital, you're going to see vertical systems and horizontal systems, right? Hospitals have both, right? Horizontal system, if you take a long exposure, you very likely is going to be horizontal, a horizontal beam. So the X-ray source is here, the film or the digital plate is going to be sitting vertical, and you basically stand in front of the plate for an X-ray. And that has to do with the sample, your lungs, right? And how the radiologist is expecting to see the organs inside your body shaped, right? And if you take, again, gravity and you move it around, they're going to be shaped differently. And things are going to be obstructing each other. So you want to have objects facing a specific way.
Absolutely. So does that answer your question, David?
What was the question again? I keep forgetting the question after a while.
Beam direction.
Beam direction, that's what it was. Got it. I think we did. I think we answered the question.
Yeah. I think Glenn answered it and then Bill talked some more.
Yeah, exactly. That's usually how it goes.
All right. We could go down the rabbit hole and talk for hours on.
Yeah, but Glenn said something that was at the end there that I thought was especially interesting about electronics. Used to take their boards into the hospitals to get an X-ray, right?
Dentist.
That's not a story I've heard before, but I definitely believe it because we still run into customers that do the same thing in different industries, right? Where X-ray hasn't really permeated that industry. They're taking their armor plate to the dentist or the doctor to get an X-ray of it, see how it's going.
Right.
Yeah, and if the armor plate has a good, health insurance plan, it might be covered.
Yeah, exactly. Be a free X-ray.
Free
Yeah.
X-ray.
Yeah. Insurance claims from the owner of the company go up drastically. Hey, why did you have 700 X-rays last month?
Exactly. Yeah.
That brings us to our next question. It's a little bit more fun. What are some interesting things that you have inspected under X-ray? Kind of cool stuff have you looked at? I know Bill's got some pictures behind him. But
Oh yeah. Be good to see if people can figure out what those things are.
yeah, there you go. A little hard from this vantage point, but
What do you think, Glenn? What interesting things have we X-rayed with? Have we X-rayed?
Over the years, I've X-rayed quite a variety of things, right? From animals, dirt, believe it or not, to Barbie dolls. I mean, there's the ability to, or the X-ray, imaging of product is unlimited. At some point in manufacturing, in every manufacturing, sector, there's a need for X-ray. So I've X-rayed components of food. We've X-rayed food. I had an application one time where we X-rayed 10,000 loaves of bread. Somewhere along the way, they lost some stuff in bread, right? And they were looking for that pencil or that pen in the loaf. It's in one of those loaves.
Or hairnet, or nail, right?
It's like
the glove.
How did that glove get in the, a package of coffee? There's a glove and a package of coffee. Watches, die casting, especially die casting. Probably the most interesting thing I X-rayed, at least at the time, were brake pads for the space shuttle.
Oh, cool.
They were like a carbon type based pad, and it seems they broke off some needles in some of those pads and they needed to find the needles. So we X-rayed a bunch of those. So, the application is endless. Foodstuffs, electronics. Actually, electronics and BGAs are probably the most boring thing we ever X-rayed, right? A BGA is a BGA. It's got how many balls? It needs to be circular, needs to not have a lot of voids. It's some of the other applications that are most exciting. One of them that most people don't realize is the insurance industry. Items that are in fires, essentially. You'll have an insurance investigator come in and take the electrical components out of your house, electrical appliances, and they will take them back to a warehouse and X-ray them to try to determine the cause of the fire. Forensics is a huge thing. You start looking at art. Art is another interesting one when you can actually image a picture underneath of a picture, right? That's always interesting. So there are all kinds of sectors that we can touch. And
we have one of those examples on the website, of the how the X-ray revealed a different painting underneath from one of the great masters.
You want to share the dog tags? That was an interesting application, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, go ahead. That was your deal. When we did the unclaimed dog tags.
Unclaimed dog tags. That was a very, very interesting project. It's an organization that collects dog tags from World War II, especially World War II in Japan, not in Japan. in Europe and the Pacific Islands. And their mission is to reintroduce or offer dog tags to the family of the owners, and for the most part, soldiers that had perished in a Second World War battlefields. So we received a batch of those dog tags because the weather, rust and overall aging had all but completely destroyed the dog tag. So there was no visible identification that we're able to identify who the dog tag belonged to. So using X-ray, we were able to uncover some of the inner layer imprint of the dog tag and reconstruct and find who that those IDs belong to, and we're able to reintroduce them to their to the family of the owners. And those are all soldiers that died in the battlefield. So it's a very touching project, and one of the many ways X-ray inspection can help people.
Right. That's one of the key. You talk to someone about X-ray, and for the most part, in the medical industry, nobody knows that there's industrial X-ray available, right? It's a huge part of the medical industry. But if you tell someone from the medical industry that, oh, I'm in the X-ray business, they say, are you a radiologist? No, not quite. And you explain what we do, and they are quite shocked that they are a complete industry that is X-raying product, not only finished product, parts presence placement, quality control, archaeological. You look at some of the agricultural applications, right? Looking at seeds and looking at seed viability and root viability. So it's the industrial X-ray industry is huge, So I got dropped off one time on an oil rig in the middle of Gulf of Mexico. Jumped out of a helicopter to show a bunch of guys how exciting it would be to X-ray the pipes, right? So that's an interesting thing. So, there's always an application that we'll run into that it's like, I've never seen that before. That's interesting, And then there are a few that actually stand out, right? Especially when you come home and you say, don't buy that anymore, right? I think we should buy that anymore based on what I just saw.
Yeah, we had a few of those. They shall remain nameless, right, Glenn, for this presentation?
Let's not buy those anymore,
That's funny.
Yeah, sometimes my kids will send me to work with stuff to X-ray. The other day, Luke found a dead lizard on the ground. Like, here, Dad.
That one actually ended up, I saw those images on the website.
We put them in the gallery.
No, cool. Those dark spots, were they inside the lizard?
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out because his fingers were going under his belly. But there were some really dark spots. I was trying to figure out what it was. I'm not sure if he swallowed something he shouldn't have or what. But.
Just for the record, the lizard was dead before.
Yes,
Look fine, right? Just make sure that
yeah.
people don't get upset. It was already dead. So. Dead of natural causes, right?
Oh, hopefully.
And, I had an application. I ran into a guy 20 years ago that was doing X-ray art. I gave him an X-ray system, and he was actually doing some X-ray art of flowers. And he actually was quite successful at it. He was a medical radiological technologist, and he actually had some showings on projecting these X-ray images of flowers on 6-story buildings in some of these cities he went around. He did some stuff. So even in some cases, X-ray can be art.
Look here. This is beautiful art. We have all over the place. So it's,
exactly.
One application that I still impresses me when we do is counterfeit detection. and we have, is it next week, David? When do we have the Counterfeit Conference? It's coming up, right?
I think it's 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Okay. Well, check in the website. It's going to be there somewhere. We have this symposium every year to go and to get together and talk about counterfeit detection methods and technologies. But it always baffles me how creative and how industrious those criminals are. It's unbelievable. Like just recently we did some counterfeit detection for the fashion industry, right? Which is not where most of us circulate in a daily basis. But you see how well made those counterfeits are, but with X-ray you can find the inner works in the building, in the construction of those things, and you can tell them they're fake. It always impressed me. And with electronics, we've been doing that for what, 10 years now.
Yeah.
It's I think the trend is that they're getting better. So you look at your electronic components, they look exactly the same, and the internal construction can be completely different. So it's a testimony, I think, for the sophistication, right, and technology that counterfeiters have nowadays to sell fake components, especially in times of crisis, right? When you have the ups and downs of the economy is when the counterfeiters benefit the most, because every time you have a disruption in the supply chain, right? You have a gap of demand or capacity. Those are the gaps that counterfeiters fill and profit.
Right. Some of the disturbing part of that is some of the dollar values that they're starting to counterfeit now. Right?
I know, it's nuts. Yeah.
$1,000 or $50,000, handbags. It's $10 items.
Yeah, or capacitors.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Pennies.
Pennies. Exactly.
That's the scary part, is the prevalence of even the low dollar items being counterfeited.
Yeah, it goes back to their sophistication. That they can achieve such volume, right? That justifies they can achieve volume with that scale. With that scale, they can still be profitable by counterfeiting such low cost items. It's just incredible. Yeah.
They can earn the 20% more or whatever by calling it a name brand versus calling it an off brand. Right?
Yeah.
We just helped that guy out with his blog about Oliver.
Oliver started with the dongle, right? Yeah,
lightning adapter, right? I mean, the people who made that could have just sold it as an off brand. People would still buy them, right? They went through all the trouble. I mean, the box looked remarkable.
Yeah.
The connector itself was decent. Once you X-rayed it, was.
Yeah.
But, right. It was like I think those are $10 new from Apple, right?
Yeah, it's a little more than that. I think it's like.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think you can buy anything for $10.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, the level of sophistication.
No comment, but it's
what they're willing to put in to make a dollar per item. Impressive.
And at the same time, if you look at the device from Apple, there's a lot of electronics in there, so that also the phones can identify that that's not a legit component, right? So there's both sides that play in a very interesting way. But again, very high level of sophistication, right? To fake a product.
Yeah.
Hey, David, can you put down on the comments or whatever description the links to all those things we talked about?
Yeah.
After this is done? Okay. So
yeah, definitely. And just for reference, that symposium is August 4th to 6th, the virtual conference.
Virtual, of course. Everything is virtual now. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us.
We're done already? Oh, that was fast.
Stumped him, but thanks, Bill. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone,
see you next time.
For watching and join us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Quay, which one?